I'm Bob Arnold. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I'm a professor at the University of Pittsburgh. And I teach largely doctor-patient communication and medical ethics and palliative care, which is care for patients with life-limiting and terminal illnesses. What I mostly do is that I'm in a sort of new field. So I'm at the intersection of a lot of fields that aren't sort of basically science. I mean, I joke that when you go to medical school and when you interview people, they say, you know, why do you want to be a doctor? And you say, I want to be a doctor because I want to I like science and I want to cure diseases. And I think that's usually the worst reason to become a doctor, because in 2004, most of the people that you see have chronic illnesses that aren't curable. And so what you spend most of your time doing is, in fact, trying to improve people's quality of life by attending to their symptoms and by sort of making sure that you're walking with them and they understand what their future is and what their choices are, and that you can help them sort of do as well as possible. It's particularly true for older populations or people with terminal illnesses. And that's, I think, a new way to think about medicine, because a lot of people think about medicine that the goal is to cure illnesses. And the problem is, if that's true, doctors aren't very good, because I'm an internist, so I take care of adults. And I joke that every patient that I take care of either leaves me or dies. And so if my criteria for success is curing illness, all internists are failures, because all our patients in the end die. But part of what being a really good doctor then is making sure that you've treated their symptoms and you've made sure that you haven't put them through things that they don't want to be put through, and that you've supported their family when they get really sick and in the dying process. And that's a new thing in America, and it's called palliative care. And I guess part of the reason that I was nominated for this is that I've been relatively I've been one of the leaders in American palliative care, and am the president of the organization that supports palliative medicine, and have been trying to get palliative medicine to be a specialty within American medicine. The other probably reason is that, again, when you think of medicine, you think of high-tech things that are on television, you know, MRIs and CAT scans and PET scans and all that stuff. But the most common thing doctors do is they sit down with patients and they say, what brought you in today? And they negotiate, they make a diagnosis often from their history, and they negotiate and try to educate their patients to live healthier lifestyles. And that's all about communication skills. And so the other reason is probably that I've done a fair amount of both research and teaching on how to help doctors improve their communication skills. And if any of you have had many experiences with doctors, it's sometimes harder than it thinks, because it isn't just like talking like you would talk to one of your friends. It's a sort of a more difficult thing, and I think it's particularly difficult for doctors because they see patients who've gone through so much, and they both want to be empathetic and sort of acknowledge that, and on the same sense, they sort of need to not feel too sad themselves when they're taking care of patients. Probably the most important thing is that it's usually about teachers. There are two teachers who sort of stick mostly in my mind. There was a teacher I had in English when I was in like 9th grade. And for the first semester, he would only let us write in short sentences. So you couldn't do anything but one noun and one verb, which, you know, given that we all thought we were great writers, pretty much sucked. But what it taught me was how to write. So I can write, I know that every paragraph is supposed to have a theme, and all the paragraphs are supposed to tie together. And when you sort of become an adult and you have to write a lot, in fact, that has probably put me, you know, 10 yards ahead of the class. And so even though he was a bit, I didn't understand it, and it was a bit of a shock to keep getting papers back that he gave me incompletes and worse on. It was probably the most valuable lesson. The second sort of most valuable lesson that it just shows that you never know what's going to turn out to be valuable is I took typing when I was like a junior, and I took it because it was easy and you didn't figure it would ever use it much, and yet it's probably the most important skill, or one of the most important skills that I learned in high school, because everything's on computer now. And if you don't know how to type, if you can only write stuff, particularly if you're a doctor and no one can read your handwriting, is sort of not very useful. So I guess the second thing is that you never sort of know when things can be valuable. And the third thing was there was a teacher who sort of showed me, well, there were two other teachers in high school. One was my debate teacher and an English teacher, and what she sort of showed is that how important it was to have someone who paid attention to you, because she was a great teacher, and she was, you know, it was like her first year out of college, and so she was excited and eager and spent lots of time with us and gave us lots of sort of positive feedback, and both sort of taught me how to think critically, but more importantly taught me that you should do things that you really like to do, and sort of that you could really help people by spending time with them and sort of helping them grow, and that was in certain ways as important as anything that you did. And the other was a history teacher who was a bit of a curmudgeon-y person who I had a bit of a habit of being smart enough but sitting in the back and being relatively obnoxious. And because I was smart enough, I could relatively get away with it. And he was the sort of first person who sort of called me on it and made me sort of work harder than I otherwise would have had to work. So he sort of showed me that it wasn't good enough just to get a good grade because I could get a good grade, but that I had to do work that was work that I would be proud of, as opposed to just sort of succeeding on other people's sort of view of the world. Sort of, when I look back, those are the people that matter the most. And I think, you know, to look back at a high school and have, you know, 3 or 4 teachers who really made a difference in your life is an unusual thing.